Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. It is February 27th, which means that somehow we are already at the end of February. I feel like I said the exact same thing at the end of January, but that's how it is. Time goes and flies when you're having fun, right? So, as always, just a quick introduction. My name is Taryn Hewitt. I am the organizer of our group, Work Life Balance for Overachievers, and I am also a work life balance coach. And this is our Bright Spot video. It is our weekly video we do every Monday to help make Monday a bright spot in your week, but also to help introduce new concepts, new tips, things that you can apply to your life immediately to help you create more time for yourself and achieve better work-life balance. So today's topic is one that I have been thinking a lot, not only for myself and for you, but I've just been ruminating on it a little bit because it's this really interesting topic, especially even as you go into coaching. It's almost something that at times you can see a little bit more if you're not careful. And so I just thought it was really interesting and something that I wanted to dive into a little bit more with the group. So what we're going to be talking about today is the difference between making progress and faking progress. So before I get too far, I just want to pause and say, we're going to talk, I'm going to use that word faking it a little bit as we go. And I just want to acknowledge that when I'm saying fake, right, there's not a negative intention behind that. There's not a judgment behind this word. There's just an acknowledgement behind it. So the concepts that we're going to talk about are very normal. They're very typical to see in all human beings. And that's why it makes this such an important topic, especially for anybody who is actively working towards a specific goal and trying to enact some kind of change in their life, right? And so along those lines, most of us do have something that we are actively working on, some goal, right? So in this group, we're going to talk a lot about work-life balance. So you might be working on reducing your schedule or reducing your workload or spending more time with your family or finding a different job that supports that better, right? There's a lot of goals that could be wrapped up in this topic, this greater topic of work-life balance and creating more time for yourself. But no matter what goal you're working on and no matter what your situation is, there is one universal truth, which is change is uncomfortable, right? So even when you're working on something that you really want, even when you're working on something that is extremely important to you and you know deep in your gut that it's going to have a major impact on your life and it's going to be so beneficial, it's still uncomfortable to experience any kind of change, right? So that can be rooted in a lot of things. It can be rooted in fear or worry, an unwillingness to disrupt the norm, just to list a few. But because of that, it's very easy to tell ourselves that we're making a change while our brains are in fact actually working against us. So again, I just want to say that there's nothing personal in that, right? Like your brain is simply trying to protect you when it goes into what I'm going to call faking mode. It thinks that it thinks that it has your best interests in mind, and it's up to you ultimately to recognize that your brain has enacted these protective measures and decide if you want to listen to them or not. Now, before I continue, one thing you're going to notice is that I just started referring to your brain as a separate entity. This is something I actually recommend quite a bit as you're continuing to grow and you're continuing to work on things. There's a lot, it sounds funny and it might feel uncomfortable at first, but that what I just talked about your brain putting into place protective measures is legitimately something that you will run into on pretty much every goal that you work on at any time. And referring to your brain as a separate thing, starting to view it as to a degree separate from yourself, actually has a lot of power. It's something that allows you to start, first off, it makes it easier to recognize what's happening in the moment when you do experience these feelings of discomfort, or you have new awareness that's brought to your attention. The other thing is it starts to separate you from those uncomfortable moments, right? So I have a practice that I do where I say, rather than saying I am overwhelmed, or I am sad, or I am afraid, I say my brain is telling me that I'm overwhelmed. My brain is telling me that I'm scared. My brain is telling me that I'm this, right? Just try it out. This is a separate tip from what we're talking about today, but I'm going to tell you, just try it out. You're going to hear me talk about it more. It makes all the difference in the world to start doing that for yourself. So at any rate, the question is, of course, how do you know if you're faking progress or you're making progress? So before I dive into that, what I just want to clarify a little bit more when I'm talking about faking progress is, well, no, never mind. I'm just going to dive into the tips, and then we'll kind of explore it there a little bit more. So how do you know if you're faking progress? The first way you know is if you're taking lots of action but not actually moving forward. So pause on that for a second and see, let you think on it and think if that sounds familiar at all. I will just say, to help normalize this a little bit, everything that I'm going to go through are all things that I have done myself. I have experienced them as well. So you are not alone if any of these do sound familiar. And again, what I want to invite you to do is, if you do recognize any of these things in yourself, I want to invite you to recognize if any self-judgment comes up as you realize these things. And if it does, just try to acknowledge it and then set it to the side, because you're human. This happens. This is just an opportunity to recognize if this is what you're doing so that you can change it. Okay. So we said, you can tell you're faking progress if you're taking lots of action but not moving forward. What this is, if that sounds familiar to you, what this is an opportunity to challenge yourself about what you're spending your time on. So when we have new goals that we're working on, it's very easy to get caught up in what I'll call busy work, which is a way of taking action and telling ourselves, or, our brain telling us that we're doing something, even if it's not necessarily the right thing or the best thing for the goal that we're actually working towards, right? And what that does is it creates this space of comfort. And again, that protective measure, because you're taking action, right? So if things don't go the way that you want, it's not your fault because you were taking action, right? So it's kind of your brain creating this safe space where you can feel like you're taking action, but not necessarily face any consequences if things don't quite go your way, right? So just think about that for a second. It's an opportunity. If this sounds familiar, just look at what it is that you're spending your time on. Now, the second way you can tell if you're faking progress is when you're venting or you're sharing your frustrations, or, anything along those lines with friends, family, etc. You are venting about all of the same topics. Okay, so think about that for a second. You could be trying lots of things. You could be taking lots of action, like I mentioned in the last point. You could be taking lots of action, but if your challenge stays the same, you're probably not actually going anywhere, right? Like, you probably are not making the progress that you genuinely want to make. So it's an opportunity to explore that a little bit deeper. You may need, in that situation, you may need or want to consider different action or maybe different decisions, because the reality is that progress, real genuine progress, would reveal new challenges, right? Like it would reveal new things to discuss with your friends and family. So it's just a quick one that kind of make you stop and think. The third way you can tell if you're making progress is, or sorry, the way you can tell if you're faking it is if you're having sparks of insight and breakthroughs and things along those lines and aha moments. That's actually my preferred terminology. But you're having aha moments, but you're not executing on them. So I say that because one of the things we talk about a lot in this group, if you're in coaching, you'll do this a lot, anything along those lines, if you realize that you're not making progress, it's a wonderful thing to be trying to examine why and to be exploring deeper into it. That's how you typically do move into a space of action and forward progress and solutioning, right? Like that, those are all wonderful things. But if you're having aha moments about what's got you stuck, or you're having insight or breakthroughs about things that you should be doing different, or how you need to reframe your thoughts, whatever the case may be, if you are having those insights, but you're not actually taking action on them and you're not actually doing anything different as a result of those insights, then you're not truly moving forward, right? Those require new action. They require new decisions and um, new. Well, I guess I already said it, new actions. We'll just go with it. So I say that again because again, that is something, and I mentioned at the beginning of the call or the beginning of the video that this is something that can be, if once you move into coaching and you start playing with coaching concepts, it's very easy to get stuck in examination, right? And so your coach, if you're coaching with me, I'm gonna try to pay attention to this and bring it to your attention and give you that option to play with it. Any other coach should do the same thing. Over time, they'll notice this trend, right? But um, if you're, that awareness and that examination brings new insights, but it's just as scary, right? Each individual insight requires a new change, right? We already talked about change is uncomfortable. So it's still, even if you have that awareness, even if you have that aha moment and you're like, yes, this is the thing that I need to change, I have to do this right now, it's still uncomfortable to actually do the change, right? You're just talking about it on a micro level. So again, this is normal, right? This is not something to beat yourself up about. This is not something to judge yourself on. This is just something to recognize and think about and realize if you're doing it. Again, I have done it myself. I've had to pull myself back. It's very, very, very normal. So the last way that you can tell if you're faking progress is if you can look back at a certain time frame, let's say 3, 6, or 9 months, as an example. Obviously, it could be longer. And your situation over that time frame looks basically the same, despite feeling like you've been pushing hard, or maybe even if you don't feel like you're pushing hard, but ultimately your situation looks the same. So this is very similar to the bullet that I, or the point that I made about you're venting about the same thing. It's very similar, but I think sometimes being able to actually say, hey, no, look back 6 months ago on this day or this month, what did things look like? Was it the same, or has anything progressed? Now, 3 months is really the shortest time that I recommend reviewing if you're going to try this one for your own examination, because progress sometimes creeps up on you, right? And so oftentimes that is probably more common, that we're all going to take small steps in progress, right? We're going to take tiny action on a regular basis, and then over time it's going to build up. And so 3 months is kind of maybe a good window to look at as the smallest one there. So the question then, of course, is, if those are the ways that you know that you're faking progress, then what does making great progress or legitimate progress actually look or feel like, right? So the first thing I'm going to say, which probably makes a lot of sense based on what I've been talking about, is that real progress is scary or uncomfortable, right? That's a lot of times the reason that we avoid it, or we may not take the action that we want to take, or we may not make that progress, right? Is because even if you're unhappy with something, you're used to it, right? You've developed habits of coping with it. You've developed routines around it. Whatever the goal is that you're working on, you've already developed a sense of comfort with it, even if the situation is something that you're frustrated with. If it's creating stress, it doesn't matter. You've still gotten used to it, right? So the scary feeling comes from pushing outside of your comfort zone. So it sounds funny to say it that way, but if you are scared or you're uncomfortable, check in with yourself. Obviously, there could be, that could also be a sign of the wrong thing. So if you're stuck in that and you're not sure if this is a good scary or a bad scary, send me a message. Let's talk about it. That might be a really good example of situation where coaching could be really valuable for you, is to help you think through those situations and really examine what it is that you actually want. And if you want that scary and uncomfortable, right? Those are the things that we talk about a lot in coaching. So the next way that you can recognize true progress is if you notice a difference, even a small one, in how you're feeling day to day, right? So this is an extremely important measurement for those small changes that we were talking about before that can accumulate over time, right? So small changes, those tiny steps each day, it might take months or it might take a long period of time before you notice the big difference if you're looking back over that window, but you should notice small differences on a regular basis. So this is the example that I think many of us have heard before is one that I'll talk about because it's just really easy to relate to. But if you've ever done weight loss of any kind, the one thing that you'll often hear is to not necessarily look at the scale, but pay attention to how your clothes are feeling. That's because sometimes the scale takes a little bit longer to move, but on a daily basis, the more you work towards weight loss and the more success you have with that, you will gradually feel that difference in your clothes, sometimes long before the scale ever moves, right? So just an easy example there. The other way that you can tell if you're making legitimate progress is if you have a feeling of hope and excitement about the possibility that you're working towards. So just think about that one for a second, right? If you're not making progress, you probably are still in that space of lack associated with your goals. So what that means is that you oftentimes might still be thinking the thoughts of, wouldn't it be nice if this, right? Wouldn't my life will be so much better when blank. Right? Those are the kind of the way those statements might form for us. But if you're actually making progress towards it and you subconsciously recognize that progress, that those thoughts will shift into thoughts that are more focused around hope and excitement and all of the potential amazingness that you're moving towards, right? Because you're already starting to recognize the impact of that. You're already starting to see the signs of improvement. And so it's just kind of a gentle subconscious sign that you can look for. So I've mentioned this several times. It's worth just reiterating that it's very, very easy to get caught in this trap of fake action or this trap of inaction. And so again, I hope that as you listen to this, I hope that if you recognize this in yourself, that you gave yourself grace and space to just recognize it, recognize that this is a result of your brain trying to protect you. It does this all day, every day, operating in the background. And most of the time, none of us even know that it's happening. So the fact that you're thinking about it, if this stirred anything in you and you started to ruminate on any of these or any of these sounded familiar, you're already making progress because you have this new awareness and you can decide what to do with that new awareness. Now, the other thing that I just want to pause on and say is just because you recognize that you're not making the progress you want doesn't necessarily always mean that that has to be a bad thing. Sometimes it's worth exploring why your brain is protecting you from it and decide if now is the time for the change that you're making, right? That can be just as legitimate of a possibility. But if now is the time and you're ready to actually make that change, then the one thing I will say is this is your aha moment, right? So if this stirred anything in you and you listened to any of these bullets and you went, oh my gosh, Taryn's talking about exactly the thing that I'm doing, I can't believe it. It's your aha moment. So what does that mean? It means that you have to execute on it, right? If you actually want to make progress, if now is the right time for that progress, now you have to sit down and decide what will you do with this insight that you got from watching this video today. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully somebody listened to this and you went, oh gosh, yep, I know exactly what I need to do. This is the new change. And if you don't know, right, if you have that aha moment, but you're not sure what to do next, again, you can send me a message. You can reach out to me via happythoughtscoaching.com. I have a link there that you can either reach out to me or you can schedule time on my calendar for us to talk. You can also drop a comment in the comment section. Whatever we can do to connect, I'm happy to help and support you in any way possible with this. Thank you so much. Oh, and one quick note, I will actually be on vacation in Costa Rica next week, so we will not be having a Bright Spot video next week, but we will pick up the following week. And so until then, I hope everyone has a wonderful Monday and a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks. Bye.